What's up, Battletech fans? Welcome back to the pit, and today we're going to tackle bottle caps, part 2. In part 1, we did the classic two thin coats method, and as promised, we return to the contrast paint method now. Though I had so much fun doing an intermediate video that I wanted to keep these easy, but still offer a little extra on the side for our seasoned contrast paint users. As usual, all the materials you'll need are in the video description, so let's get going. I got out my trusty can of Wraith Bone spray and started giving these a go. Remember, nozzle 6 to 8 inches away from the miniature and don't do a continuous spray. Instead, use short bursts and make several passes in this fashion, inspecting each one before moving on. Give them about an hour to dry. Here's an optional step for you if you want to take your contrast painting to the next level. Dry brush on some Menoth white highlight from Privateer Press before moving on, and when we go to do highlights later, the sharp edges and some of the panel outlines will come out a lot brighter, since the Menoth is just slightly lighter than the Wraith Bone. I just went over these with my trusty all-over dry brush and didn't take any particular care, so don't feel like this is a precision art form right now. It's just a subtle nod later that makes things pop that much more. Your mileage may vary, but I recommend it. Let's get out one of my favorites, Blood Angel's Red. It's going to look dark when it goes on and when it dries, but this is really more of a mid-grade red. If you want darker, go for Flesh Terror's Red, and if you want lighter, try Bale Red. That being said, go at these at full strength with whatever color red your Capellan fuckery takes. Just try to be careful around the areas where the shoulders and hips meet the torso, or it just means more fixing for you later, and that's no fun. I was originally planning on doing the Heavy Recon Lance for this project, but the master unit list seems to indicate that a couple of the mechs weren't available to the Cappies, so I decided the Ostboys and a Vulcan would be a good stand-in, and they also neatly fill out the classic Lance structure. 2 heavies, a medium, and a light. Nice! Do them all at once like I do, and you can let them all dry at once too. Speed! More on this in just a sec. Second verse, same as the first. Once your reds are dry, slap on a full-strength coat of Carroburg Crimson. Remember, this stuff isn't as pigmented as contrast paint, so getting a little bit of it on the limbs here and there as you work won't be the worst thing in the world. I like to fix those with Wraith Bone before I move on to a new step, but your mileage may vary. It's all about whatever will make you happy at the end of the day. I like to paint in what I call a round. It means I start with one model and work my way down the line until I'm back where I started, and by that time, the first one I painted is nearly dry. Some folks call this assembly line painting, but I digress. That won't work as well on contrast paints, but for washes, absolutely. Lower viscosity means faster drying time. Science!
Yes, science!
And away we go, dry brushing on some more Evil Sunz Scarlet. I used a smaller dry brush for this, but you can do whatever you want. Just remember, you want to keep the paint off of the white areas where you can. Quick and even passes with the brush is what you want to try for, making sure you wipe off most of the paint on a napkin or paper towel before you start. Always test on some other surface before you start going to town. It's real easy to misjudge how much paint is actually still on the brush until you test it. Just keep going until you're satisfied. Don't worry about completely changing the color of the model. We're just trying to create a base highlight off of the initial coat of contrast paint. For the greens on these, here I'll present to you a 3-tiered contrast and wash application that'll get you the deep emerald greens you're looking for. We'll need Warp Lightning contrast paint, and our shades will be Biel-Tan Green and Coelia Greenshade. First, your contrast layer will be the layer you're going to have to take the most care with. The green will stain the red bodies and leave you with unsightly blackish green blobs on your pretty red torsos. I went kinda fast until I got to the connection points as usual, and then I slowed down. Do your best to keep an eye out while you're working to catch pools forming in areas you'd rather they didn't, and use your brush to soak up as much of this as you can. You'll notice in this go-around I didn't get it all, but it also has a habit of pooling up again after you've gone over it, so make sure to be thorough and inspect to the best of your ability. Because this is all liquid, I really gotta hammer home the concept of dry time on this one. You'll be applying 3 separate colors, so a solid hour in between is a good start. I say start because the flat areas will dry real fast, and you'll get the illusion that everything is dry, when in fact, it isn't. Ask me how I know! The contrast paint or wash tends to bead up in the corners of the mini, such as where the armpits or the inside of the codpiece area would be, and because the liquid's more concentrated in those areas, it's going to take more time to dry than the flat areas that have comparatively less paint spread out over the surface. You see what I'm getting at there? Once the warp lightning is dry, go in with a coat of Biel-Tan Greenshade at full strength. We actually are trying to change the color this time, taking it down a notch into a deeper and more emerald green. We'll darken it down a bit further in the next layer, so just use this time to practice your brushwork and go a little slower, just to enjoy the process. Coelia Greenshade is the final ingredient, and it's almost like a black wash, but for green. When this sets, it will produce a deep, rich green, the kind that I'm looking for in these if I'm going to use contrast paints. I was happy with the greens I did on the Wraith, but for the sake of this video, I want these to be different than that paint job where I can, since they're so similar otherwise.
Just do it!
Once these are all thoroughly dry, I am going to give this a good dry brushing in Warpstone Glow, just to bring back a little bit of that vibrance that the Coelia Greenshade really tamps down. The green shade is necessary, but the Warpstone Glow really balances things out and puts a nice bow on the whole package. If Warpstone Glow was the bow on the package, then the highlights are definitely the ribbon holding it in place. I'm using the same colors as I did before, Moot Green and Wild Rider Red, and these are for the same effect. If you recall, I used downward motions with my brush for the green, while I was really only trying to hit the corners of the torso with Wild Rider. Too much Wild Rider will muddle all the rest of the red, same with Moot, so work your way up to an amount of highlight that you can see and are content with, and then leave it at that. Otherwise, you risk going too far, and then you'll just be unhappy with everything, and you don't want that, neither do I, so just trust me when I say less is more. We're in the home stretch, cats and kittens. I tried to go a little easy on the metallic areas this time, so do the usual. Pick your spots and get to work. Hands, gun barrels, vents. I did some really small areas, but if you don't want to or can't see as well, don't feel like you have to. Leadbelcher is my choice, but pig iron from Privateer Press is a good alternative. I didn't thin it down this go, I just went real easy on it. So I think you'll be fine if you go that route, and believe it or not, I don't always thin this stuff down either. It really just depends on what I'm about to paint and how much of it I'm going to have to use. Natch, after about 30 minutes or so, come back with Nuln Oil shade and give your metallics a coat at full strength. You'll have plenty of time to let it dry while you're working on the next step, just be sure to avoid over-application during this part of the process. It is possible to have too much of a good thing. I went with Retributor Armor this time instead of Roulet Gold, and I'm going to coat it in Agrax Earthshade instead of Seraphim Sepia this time. Now you'll have an idea of what each combination looks like. I'm still on that less is more rizzle-razzle, but you do it up however you want.
Springfield will have its first annual Do What You Feel festival this Saturday, whenever you feel like showing up.
I didn't thin this stuff either, I just used small amounts until my coverage was opaque. Would you use Sepia or Agrax? Let me know in the comments. Whichever you choose, it's the same story as the Nuln Oil. Don't go too heavy, because now the areas you're coating are even smaller. It's real easy at this stage to over-apply and have the shades getting into your greens, which you don't want, believe me. And we're done! My cockpits are Yriel Yellow with Iyanden Yellow contrast paint and ardcoat added for shine. Barrel heat effects are Magos Purple and Talassar Blue contrast paints, and the base is Stirland Battlemire with Seraphim Sepia shade. Other basing effects by Army Painter. I hope you enjoyed the first two-parter here in the pit, and if you like learning how to paint, do me a solid and subscribe. Turn on all notifications so you can find out exactly where Battlebound's gonna turn up next. And don't forget, folks, Battlebound has a Patreon now at patreon.com/battlebound. Sign up today to enjoy those benefits tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. I'm Tuckdavian, and I'll see you next time right here out on the Space Lanes.
That's on fact. I was sign stamp delivered. Queen Rat fucking entertainment out of this bitch. Like